So, Elden Ring Nightreign finally dropped. It's actually a multiplayer co-op experience, so you can fight bosses alongside other players. So that means this might be the easiest FromSoft video game.
I have thee now.
Elden Ring Nightreign is an action-adventure roguelike where you and 2 other players begin by flying toward the map, similar to Fortnite, but instead of landing in tilted towers, you don't really have a say as to where you may land. So at least that means you won't end up making a dumb decision where you start, and the game chooses the safest area to begin. Psych! Anyways, before I distracted myself, let's talk about how the gameplay works in Nightreign, because it's very different compared to every other FromSoft Souls-like game. If you're going into this game expecting slow and decisive gameplay and a lot of exploration along with taking some time to breathe and just admire the scenery and vistas, you will be more disappointed than Walter Jr. was when he didn't get his breakfast. I can't even tell you about the environment and how it looks because I was like this for my entire playthrough of Nightreign. Once you start the game, you'll find yourself in this game's version of the Roundtable Hold, which looks somewhat like Elden Ring's upon first glance, but once you look around, it really is its own thing. I'll talk more about the hub later, but for now, to even start your journey, you go up to the main table and at first, you only see one boss. But once you defeat it, then all the other bosses will be available and there's 7 in total. They're called Night Lords. Once you select which one you want to fight, you'll start matchmaking for 2 other players. Wait, what? Matchmaking? In a FromSoft game? You mean I don't have to place a summon sign down to then wait eons for someone to find the thing? I'd have a better chance of my dad coming back home sooner than it takes for someone to join my world. You can even put a password in case you want to play with friends? The hell are those? I wish before starting the actual expedition though, you could see the 2 other players running around in the hub area. It would have been cool to interact with one another. See, I miss when FromSoft knew how to write deep philosophical dialogue.
Blip, blop, blip, blop.
Now, this is where Nightreign starts to show off why it's different than the other FromSoft games, because you now have a choice to play as one of 8 total characters, called Nightfarers. I'll talk more in depth about them later in the video, but just to give a heads up about these Nightfarers, they each feel unique and fun to play. They all have their own playstyle, and none of them feel similar at all. I mean, you can even play as a hawk too! They each have their own passives, character skills which have shorter cooldowns, and of course ultimates which have longer cooldowns. If you play as a Raider for example, you can summon a giant rock from the ground that glitches bosses and enemies inside of it so nobody can attack them. It's great. The characters in this game are easily the best part of Nightreign and give this game its own identity. Yeah, Nightreign is a culmination of reused Elden Ring assets, but with these playable characters, it gives a new spin on the combat we're already familiar with, and it gives the game a fresh uplift. Some of my favorites is Wilder, who has a grapple that can make traversal even faster than it already is, and then shoots a tactical nuke from his arm. Iron Knight, who specializes in bow and arrows, can dash toward enemies marking them to deal extra damage, and then can shoot a big ass arrow that can do some nice crowd control. Or Duchess, who can rewind time on an enemy you're attacking, so it repeats all the damage you just did on top of the hits you're already doing. You can play as Executor, who parries like he's in Sekiro, and then he can unleash his inner Sigma and transform into a giant beast just wailing on everyone around him. There's some serious fun to be had here just experimenting and trying out all these different characters, and that's where a big portion of my enjoyment came with Nightreign. Look, there's even skins you can get for the characters, and some of them are callbacks to past FromSoft games. So not only can you play as a hawk, but you can play as a hawk dressed as Solaire. I say Miyazaki cooked, but he wasn't even involved with Nightreign. Yeah, he decided to take a break and give that responsibility to a different team. So I guess that means we don't have any sort of Lake of Rot scenario again.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass.
The match begins with you and your team aura farming and then walking toward the cliff. We then see this spectral bird fly beside us, ready to catch us with its legs so we can grab and fly toward the map we play on, which is called Limveld. It would have been funny if our character just jumps off the cliff to grab the leg. The bird just pulls its leg away, leading our character to fall to their demise. Anyways, once the cutscene is over, the match finally begins and we're flying over the map. Like I said, we don't pick where we land. The game chooses for us, and it will always drop us near some enemies so we can pick them off and use the runes we get to level up to level 2 as quickly as we can. How do we level up? Well, at the side of grace. Only it's not like every other FromSoft game where we choose to level up specific stats and analyze the best option to choose from. Instead, when you level up, it gives you a stat boost all across the board, which to me makes sense and is the right move. With a fast-paced game like this where you constantly have to be on the run like a delivery man running for his life from pit bulls, you can't afford to be taking your sweet-ass time choosing which stats to level up. I keep saying Nightreign is fast-paced, but what do I mean? Well, there is no downtime in this game, unless you count the cutscene at the beginning and the end of the match where it gives you ample time to release the Kraken in the bathroom. You need to always be moving and use that super sprint, which is about twice as fast as just running normally. The reason you need to be moving fast is because like Fortnite or PUBG, the match starts out with the entire map open to you. However, there's an invisible timer you need to be aware about, because after some time, an amber alert appears on the right of your screen saying the storm is slowly coming. And if you open your map, you can see the storm consuming the world along with the next safe zone you need to get to before the circle closes in and starts damaging you. Again, some more time will pass and the circle will start shrinking even more, and the final safe zone will be this small area with a glowing tree on top of it, which will act as the location where you fight the final boss for that night. So that's that's why you need to haul ass every time you load in. Honestly, you want to start planning your route as soon as the day begins and you're flying over the map. You can't afford to be indecisive and ponder too long as to which location you should head toward next. But practice makes perfect. Your ability to succeed in this game is correlated to how much you can level up before the end of each night. I'd argue leveling up as fast as you can is your #1 priority. You want to be at least level 6 by the end of night 1, and at the very least, level 12 by the time you face the Night Lord itself. Honestly, with the addition of 2 other players, you can really just jump some of the bosses around the map and bully them. But the question you'll be asking yourself isn't if you can even beat a certain boss, but it's if you can beat them fast enough before the circle starts closing. Even if you do defeat it though, but took a long time, you might as well have lost, because then you won't have time to do anything else, which could cost you a level or 2, and who knows, those 2 extra levels could have helped you beat the Night Lord. So it's not about winning fights, but it's about winning them fast. With that being said, I will say that there have been many moments where my team and I try to push our luck by trying to kill a boss as quickly as we can as the circle is closing in and the storm is heading right toward us. These were some of the most riveting and memorable moments in Nightreign for me, and nothing gets the heart pumping and the sweat dripping to trying to kill a boss as fast as possible as the storm is just inches away from you. Everyone has to lock in and do their parts to near perfection, and then when we actually did succeed in the nick of time, it was such a euphoric feeling. Moments like these is where Nightreign shines, like my car keys do when I start drinking. I've been talking about how you need to move fast in order to level up to be strong enough to fight bosses, but what is it you're even doing while you're running all over the place? Well, you're heading toward the various churches, forts, ruins, camps, castles, basically anywhere that has bosses for those rooms to level up and loot to deal better damage, but most importantly, a reward after defeating the boss of that location, which will look like a big glowing soul. The soul will give you the choice between 2 or 3 rewards, which could be anything from passive buffs or new weapons. The buffs could be more physical damage, flasks having improved healing, more stamina, things like that. There's of course other ways to get loot, like from the normal wooden chests you find in different points of interest, which include items that improve resistances to ailments, talismans, healing items, slight buffs, and of course, weapons. But these weapons aren't usually as good as the ones you can get after beating a boss. To increase your chances of finding better weapons, go to the points of interest and defeat the mini bosses there. But especially go out of your way to defeat the wandering tougher bosses around the map that are by themselves. They have the best chance to drop those orange legendary weapons. If your luck is horrible on a certain run and you just can't find anything good, then you should go to one of the mines on the map. Defeat the enemy in there and get the purple smithing stone. That way you can fully upgrade your starting weapon to purple status, which is better than nothing. There is another way to get better weapons though, but this is relying on your teammates, so if you have good randoms or friends, you're in luck. When you defeat a boss, the loot you get to choose from is different for everyone. Meaning, if your teammate gets a weapon that may not be a good fit for their character, but great for yours, they can acquire it and then drop it for you, and then vice versa. It encourages teamwork and reminds you that you're all trying to win and not just out for yourselves. So next time, if you get a weapon that sucks for you, don't just discard it, because your teammate may be starving for an upgrade. Speaking of upgrades, let's talk about some of the points of interest you'll be running toward. The most important being are the churches of America. The churches allow you to get an extra charge for your healing flask, so these should be your top priority. You will not beat the Night Lord with only 3 flasks to spare, unless you're just built different. In my opinion, your routes and where you decide to go should be based on if there are churches along the way. They might as well be your North Star or guiding moonlight. If there's a path that has churches spread around, that's the way you need to start heading. By the time you reach day 3, you want to be at least 7 healing flasks, or at least 6. For example, there's another point of interest called Ever Jails, which if you have a stone sword key, you can open it and it unlocks a secret boss fight, which is great because more runes and upgrades for your character. Plus, the bosses are easy. However, there's also merchants that sell a variety of weapons and items, and magical towers that if open have great staff for magic-based characters. As you're running between all these locations, there's spirit streams that make you jump super high to help you cover more ground. And you can even ride your spectral bird to get around the map faster, which is especially useful if you're running away from the storm. There's even wall climbing you can do to get over obstacles more efficiently, and it's pretty smooth. I kinda want this to make a return in FromSoft's next game. Maybe they can add a leap of faith. The points of interest you see on your map aren't even the only things to look out for. There's scarabs you can find that drop a talisman after you kill them, packs of roaming enemies for some extra runes, like I mentioned before, wandering bosses in different areas. They really filled up the map with a lot of interesting stuff to do and discover. It would have gotten old quick if there was literally nothing else in the map except the marked locations. You would spend most of the time sprinting everywhere, and luckily they didn't make that seem like a chore, since like I mentioned earlier, there's different ways to traverse the map. Can you imagine real life was like that though? Your neighbor's car broke down, so he summons his pet fucking parakeet to fly him to work? While you're running all over the place, defeating enemies and bosses, mistakes are bound to happen, which leads us to the revive mechanic. Kinda like Call of Duty Zombies, but instead of thoughtfully and carefully injecting your teammate with morphine to revive him, here in Nightreign you beat the shit out of him. Reminds me of my uncle. Yeah, you just have to wail on your teammate to revive them. Not only is it pretty funny, it's stressful, especially during boss fights. Once you start slapping your enemy, the boss gets a 6th sense and just starts making a beeline towards you. If you get down once, you have 1 purple bar. Pretty easy. Get down again, there's 2 bars. Not as easy, but manageable. A 3rd time, you now have 3, and it may not even be worth reviving you because it takes a long time to pick you up. Because it takes a lot of smacking to pick you up. up. You'll end up looking like me after I don't bring my dad his beers. Luckily, there are different strategies to revive someone. For example, using a bow to safely hit your teammate from a distance, using Duchess's ult to turn invisible and safely attack, using Guardian's ult to dive onto the ground constantly reviving everyone, or using any ultimate that deals massive damage to not only attack your teammate, but the boss as well. It's adrenaline-inducing risky gameplay. Do you take your chances focusing on the boss, or take the risk of reviving your teammate before the boss catches you and puts a stop to it? There's nothing more stressful when you're just about to revive your teammate, and then the boss is going Mach 5 toward your ass. But like I said, the more you go down, the more damage it's going to take to get you back up. So don't be careless either and think you're in the clear. But yeah, thanks to all the different characters you can play as, it's intense moments like these where your skill with the Nightfarer is put to the test and shows how proper teamwork can clutch what may have been like a doomed game. Speaking of the different characters, let's talk about them. There's 8 in total, each being unique, catering to vastly different playstyles. I very briefly talked about some of them earlier, but I'll explain the rest a bit more. There's Raider, who summons a giant rock from the ground that does AoE damage initially. It becomes part of the environment, dealing bonus attack damage to you and your teammates if they're nearby. Guardian, who acts at the front line of defense and specializes in halberds and shields. He can soar into the air and kamikaze dive onto the ground, causing AoE damage, and can sometimes even clutch the game since his ult revives everyone nearby. Revenant, who specializes in summoning, and she's fun to play. You have to manage your little family of summons and keep track of their health, so you're constantly switching one out for the other. Your ultimate also comes in clutch, healing everyone, and if you have the big ass skeleton summon out while you ult, it shoots a strong death ray. Recluse specializes in sorceries, so having a staff is a must. Her character skill lets her create crazy spells by pulling element off enemies and teammates. It's seriously the most fun I've ever had playing a magic build in a FromSoft game. They seriously nailed the feeling of being a witch. I was half expecting to be burned alive at the stake. It's not a complete in-depth analysis of every single character. That could be a video on its own, but I just wanted to demonstrate to you how many different ways you can play Nightreign, even if your team composition isn't ideal. I've beaten some of the hardest bosses in the game with like 2 of the same characters. This to me increases the replay value because since every Nightfarer is unique and interesting, it makes you want to try and learn every single one of them. At least that's how it is for me. Even though I already beat the game, I still find myself coming back to improve on a character I don't have much experience with. I mentioned earlier the final boss of a night. They're called the Night Boss. At the end of the first 2 days, when the circle has shrunk completely, you and your team will gather to the center of it, which you'll know you've reached the center when a giant glowing tree is visible above. You'll face a wave of enemies first, and then a purple cloud will appear spawning the Night Boss. And the bosses? They're pretty good. A lot of them are challenging and make you lock in since they're not like the mini bosses you were defeating prior, but they are designed with co-op in mind. You'll sometimes fight against multiple bosses at once, like the Cavalryman, or the Crucible Knight and Hippopotamus. They may even be old Elden Ring bosses with a twist since they'll have new attack combos to look out for. Morgott makes a return and he seems more aggressive this time around. One move that he has that crosses my mind is this combo where he spams daggers at you. He just does not fucking stop. Not only that, but we got some OG Dark Souls bosses making a surprise guest star appearance. Nameless King, Centipede Demon, Dancer of the Boreal Valley, Smelter Demon, Gaping Dragon, and the Duke's Dear Frazier. All of this pushes you and your team to play, well, as a team, because you will be humbled if you try and take on all these bosses alone. Even if one player is doing ass, that affects everyone since now you gotta babysit and dedicate time to reviving that one person. Once you manage to defeat the Night Boss, you can choose up to 3 passive buffs, but they are better than the usual ones you can find from the mini bosses. With the Night Boss of day 1 down, day 2 begins. So what should you expect on day 2? Well, one noticeable difference is sometimes these random events can happen that activate your fight or flight and forces you and your team to focus and deviate from the planned course. You can be minding your own business and then all of a sudden you hear Morgott give a villainous monologue and jump you out of nowhere, forcing everyone to drop what they're doing and now deal with a spontaneous boss fight. I swear, this motherfucker decides to stop in the most inconvenient of times. We'd be in the middle of fighting a normal boss out in the world, and then Margaret thinks this looks all fun and dandy and wants to join in on this too. Piece of shit. There's other moments where you'll just suddenly get kidnapped and get stuck into a giant bubble, and now you're fighting against the Elden Beast's younger brother. It splashes water at you, which for some reason damages you. This must be what Asmongold goes through. Again, this could happen at the worst moments. I was in the middle of fighting a tough field boss, and I see my teammate get trapped in the bubble right behind me, so I had to haul ass to help him out. It was pretty cool though. Another event that could happen is you and your team could just be casually frolicking around the map, only to get cursed by some demon which permanently cuts your health. The only way to remove this is to find the demon and pay his fee to lift the curse. What a greedy bastard. If you do pay the fine, you can get blessed with a certain buff. For example, you could get the Symbol of Avarice from the Dark Souls games to gain more runes. It's a talisman in Nightreign, and just like in Dark Souls, it slowly drains your health. So if you choose this, it's best to remove it once you reach a Night Lord. Or if you're Mr. Krabs and don't want to spend even a penny, you could smack the demon, and now you've just unlocked a secret boss fight. Stuff like this is cool because it forces you and your team to adapt and improvise to see if you guys can handle different threatening situations being thrown at all of you. One problem with all this though, it doesn't happen that often. At least it didn't happen for me. I hardly see these events, and I have over 50 hours. There was one event where a bunch of enemies with madness appeared out of nowhere, and I had to take on waves of them. I only saw this once. Another problem, there's not a lot of variety. They brought back Margate, which is cool, but they have an entire ocean of Elden Ring bosses they can use, and the lack of variety shows big time. This seems like a missed opportunity. There's another world event that could happen, but it's not as interesting. Sometimes a certain area will have this giant lightning tornado vortex thing above it, which sounds sick, but all it really does is buff the enemies and bosses and has NPC invaders to fight that have decent loot. I don't know. It just takes too much time to fully complete and the rewards aren't the best. The most impactful changes that could happen by far, however, are the shifting earth events. There's 4, a giant lava crater straight out of Mustafar, the shrouded city which is somehow safer than Chicago, the rotting forest which reminds me of that time SpongeBob and Patrick had to run through the perfume department, and the snowy mountains. These areas are big enough to the point if you decide to step inside one of them, you might as well just be spending your entire day exploring a shifting earth location. You can tell what kind of shifting earth event you'll be getting when you open your map at the beginning of the game. Basically, a segment of the map has been completely terraformed and only one event can occur per game. These are quite challenging though, so it's recommended you visit these locations on day 2 after leveling up some more. I'd say around level 9 to 10. They do have secret objectives that if completed grant you and your team some of the best loot in the game. For example, in the Shrouded City, if you defeat the main boss in there, which is the natural born of the void, you not only get some great loot from the boss itself, but just a few steps ahead you can get a reward that grants a single revive when you're down and it boosts your power levels. Or in the crater, when you go all the way down you have to fight the magma worm, and once you approach the altar nearby, you can automatically transform one of your weapons into a legendary weapon. And that's already on top of all the bosses you can encounter on the way to the secret event. That's just 2 secrets. I'm not going to go over all of them because, well, they're secrets. The shifting earth events are fun to explore when you don't have a clue where to go. But since they always have the same layout no matter what, once you've seen it a couple of times, that charm starts to wear off. They don't happen frequently enough though. I've only seen the crater event like twice. They should let you choose which event you want to have. That would help because it's annoying when you want a specific shifting earth event and you just end up getting nothing. Hello, it's me from the future. So Elden Ring Nightreign had an update where now you can actually buy which shifting earth event you want. You have to defeat one of the enhanced versions of the Night Lords though, which I'll get into later. So far so good. If you manage to survive the first 2 days and defeat both night bosses, you reach day 3 and the final boss, the Night Lord. After beating the second night boss, you can touch this goo and get transported to this little area to prepare for the Night Lord, which gives me ample time to actually enjoy the vistas. You have the grace to level up, a merchant to buy any last minute items, and an anvil to upgrade a weapon. You then all head toward this big ass door. A cutscene will happen, so if you gotta use the bathroom, now's the time. Open it, and then once inside, you enter the boss arena and face the Night Lord you chose to fight at the Roundtable Hold. The final bosses are solid, like how I get when I see recluses. Gladius, the 3-headed dog for example, can split into 3 separate dogs, one for each teammate. The boss is basically asking if we want its clones to use Susanoo too. Now, aside from the traditional bob and weave, slice and strike gameplay you've come to be familiar with, there's a fair share of gimmicks in these fights as well, but they're implemented so subtly that you may not even notice at first glance, and I think these are the best implemented gimmicks in any FromSoft game. It really makes those bosses that much more engaging. Marish, for example, has an attack where it'll curl into a ball and proc your sleep, which if the bar fills completely, your character will flop on the ground and get a lot of damage dealt. Your best bet would be to run toward it and attack it until it staggers. Or there's Libra, who summons these golden shards that if you destroy them, it'll stagger the boss, giving you a chance to land some hits. This whole sequence is hectic because the window to destroy them all is small. They could be above you too, so having ranged attacks is a must. And the stakes are high because if you fail to destroy them all, he gets buffed and goes apeshit. At least before the fight starts, he has the courtesy to offer you some buffs before spreading your cheeks. Every Night Lord has a weakness to a certain ailment, which if you get your fucking magnifying glass and squint so hard you change ethnicities, you'll be able to see right below their image on the expedition screen in the Roundtable Hold. Not only will you do more damage, but attacking the boss with his weakness could cause him to react in certain ways. Using poison on Adele, for example, causes it to start throwing up, which gives you good time to start hurting it. And using holy damage on Holster causes him to stagger and lose a chunk of health. Little quirks like these give you many different ways to tackle a Night Lord, and it really emphasizes teamwork. You could have an Iron Knight in the distance trying to proc poison on the boss, and then a melee character using the boss's weakness to quickly chip away at its health. Not only that, but the fights can be downright beautiful too. Like there's one that splits the heavens right before he reunites you with your ancestors, or another transforming the arena into a beautiful meadow before it paints it red with your blood, or an ice dragon turning the sky into shattering ice. Oh, and the music? These are some of the best boss soundtracks I've ever heard in a FromSoft game. Hands down, Libra has almost like this tribal sound to it, and Gladius' soundtrack sounds chaotic to match the chaos of 3 dogs running towards you. Fulgor has this tough chanting section of a song, and it sounds like I'm getting ready to go into battle. And Caligos? Well, it's just downright beautiful, and it sounds almost tragic. Made me feel kind of bad for fighting him, but then I remembered I've been stuck on the fucker all day, so fuck him! So yeah, and really do feel like final bosses. That cutscene as you're opening the door about to fight it had me sweating and praying attempt number 10 would be the one. These are some of the most engaging and fun bosses FromSoft have created, and I'm hoping in their future games they add more interesting ways to take down a boss aside from just hitting it, because these won me over. Team composition won't guarantee a win. You could have the perfect combination of Nightfarers, but if your team is playing with a Mario Kart steering wheel, you're deep fried. If you win or lose, you get relics at the end of your run, along with the in-game currency which is called Merc. Relics are items you can equip on your character at the Roundtable Hold that can improve certain stats and abilities, and Merc lets you buy stuff from the jar merchant at the hub, and even buy skins. I keep briefly talking about the Roundtable Hold in Nightreign, but let me get into a little more details since I always talk about hub areas. They are going to be the place you spend most of your time in to escape the horrors of the outside. Yeah, right off the bat, this version of the Roundtable Hold is way better than the original from Elden Ring. First of all, it's bigger with plenty of more things to do. There's a training area to try out different weapons and character abilities, a jar shop to buy more stuff, a bunch of the playable characters will be just hanging around chilling, and you can talk to them, which makes the place really feel alive and like a home. Outdoor areas with forests and gardens that are just so peaceful, a place to read up on each of the character stats, even a nice beach area to hear the sound of the waves and the view of the ocean. This truly feels like a safe, homey hub, and I put it up there at top 5 for me. I liked it that much. Again, I just wish you could see your team running around in here too, but it is what it is. Among all these functions that the Roundtable has, there's one that's very important that a lot of new players overlook because it requires them to actually read. It's the journal entries. There's a journal entry for each Nightfarer, and the more you play as that character and complete runs, you unlock a new chapter and you get the option to begin Remembrance, which is a side quest you can do for that specific character. When this happens, you go back in time and go around talking to NPCs in the hub that'll give you some backstory on your character and sometimes on the NPC themselves, giving more depth to the Nightfarers. They'll then ask you to collect a certain item out in the world, which usually involves defeating an enemy or boss. Once you complete that Remembrance, more information about your Nightfarer will be available in the journal. And after playing with the character some more, you unlock a new chapter and can begin another Remembrance. You're going to want to do these because completing side quests can grant you some of the best relics in the game for that particular character you're playing as, and this is really the only way to get the most top tier relics in the game. Yeah, sure, you can buy more at the jar merchant, but the difference with the relics you get from Remembrances is that they're guaranteed to have character specific buffs. Also, some skins are available after completing enough missions. I mean, look at the Wilder Remembrance skin. Can you spot the difference? A fucking pin! Aside from that, the Remembrances are the best way to progress your favorite characters. I gotta say, usually stories in multiplayer games are whack, and I don't normally care since it's usually just a wall of text. I came into this game with that same impression, and totally started thinking I wouldn't care. But the more I did these Remembrances and learned about each character and their backstories, I not only completed these missions for their rewards, but to learn more about them. It really humanizes all the characters, even the Hawk, and the ending for the Wilder, that was pretty sad, I'm not gonna lie. This is something I wish Elden Ring did with NPCs at the Roundtable Hold. They kinda just stand there and badmouth each other. In Nightreign, it really does seem like everyone is close and all unified for a singular goal. What I'd love to see next time though, is seeing the NPCs actually talking to each other. That would make it more lively. Kind of like how in Oblivion when you walk into a room and they're all just talking over each other.
His son's dead, right under the noses of the Imperial.
Can't hear myself
It's a
saying.
disgrace.
So I got a problem. Nightreign is intended for multiplayer and co-op. I need friends. Problem is, none of them really care for Souls-like games, so I was on my own for most of it. Meaning, I had to play with randoms. So how'd that go? Well, unlike in Marvel Rivals where my teammates before joining my game got a lobotomy, the randoms in Nightreign didn't really give me many issues. Yeah, sure, occasionally someone will go off by themselves or be level 3 thinking they could take on a field boss, but most of the time they all know what to do and where to go. So, I still had a lot of fun, and it wasn't frustrating, most of the time. There are some issues though when it comes to randoms, and to break it down for you guys, I played a handful of games with a buddy of mine, and those matches were a lot easier simply because we would actually communicate. I was gonna save this for the negative section of the video, but I just have to get this out of my system now. Look, the only way to communicate with randoms is by pinging different places on the map. Like I said, this was manageable because your teammates most of the time will go to the location you pinged, especially when they've beaten a couple of Night Lords and get close to the final boss. You'll matchmake with more experienced players. But those few matches where you get teammates who recently fried their brains and they don't follow the pings, it's frustrating as hell. Also, there could be other options to signal to your teammates aside from pinging. I can't tell you how many times I have a team who thinks they're better than they actually are, and they try to beat a boss that's several levels tougher than all of us. It was moments like those where I just wish there was an option to put retreat, so they know we need to bounce. In Marvel Rivals, even if you don't have a mic, there's an entire wheel of quick options you can tell your team, like needing heals, thanking them, giving your ultimate status. Things like these enforces team play and gives your team a better chance at winning. Nightreign games can last nearly an hour, and stuff like knowing when someone's ultimate is close to fully being charged, or even someone just saying thanks, goes a long way to adding more personality and team play to the players in your runs. When I played those few matches with a buddy, it really did feel like we played as a team since we can all use callouts, status reports, and most importantly, we were all on the same page and not spread out. Not to say playing with randos is a miserable experience, but it can go from good to great with these small additions. Anyways, rant over. The solo experience is a lot better compared to Nightreign's initial release because it was exponentially more difficult. And unless you were on the upper echelon of skill, it was nearly impossible to complete all the Night Lords alone, even with the scaling of enemies and bosses. Now, however, FromSoft patched the single player to be more fair. Now, once per night, if you go down, you'll automatically get revived, which is huge. You now earn a lot more runes, making leveling up substantially more convenient. And you can have a bunch of Wending Graces, which grant a free revive on top of the one you get by default. At this point, I'd argue solo expeditions are easier than having a full team. This patch even increased the audience score of Nightreign over on Steam, so safe to say single player is also a feasible way to enjoy Nightreign. That's enough simping for the game. Now, let's discuss the negatives because this game is far from perfect. Alright, first of all, variety and overall randomness ain't the best. Once you've seen one ruin, you've seen all of them. They all have the same layout, and that goes for nearly every point of interest. I'd say once you defeated half of the Night Lords in the game, you've seen most of what Nightreign has to offer. Not to say I didn't have fun, I did, but once you have enough experience, you've developed and refined your strategies, so now you know the best routes to take, which leads to the game feeling the same. It doesn't help that these points of interest don't even have a large pool of enemies nor bosses in them. Like, you have an entire discography of enemies and bosses from so many games to choose from, and you've hardly even implemented any of them. If you see a fort, you know it's either going to be a Guardian Golem as the boss, or the Crystal Dudes. Or when you go to the big ass castle in the middle, you know it's either going to be Trolls, Crucible Knights, or the Banished Knights. You might as well be Eren Yeager because you will foresee every possible outcome approaching these areas. They could have at least added enough variety to last until the final Night Lord, but that wonder and curiosity faded at the halfway point. Now you may all be asking, well, what about the shifting Earth events? Well, those stay the same too. They don't spice it up in those areas. So again, if you've been there once, you've seen it all. Everything stays the same, and I mean everything. Enemies, bosses, merchants, even the rewards. You get to a point where you know exactly what to do and can just turn off your brain. The silver lining about all this is since everything is similar and you'll have an idea of what to expect, it gives you an opportunity to reflect on what went wrong on past runs and refine your playstyle to be efficient and know which bosses to kill, and more importantly, when to kill to save as much time as possible. I feel like FromSoft could have taken it up a notch and maybe added a new map for each Night Lord. That would have made it awesome. Not only that, but each map could correlate with the different Night Lords. Augur could have been a tropical map, Libra could have been a madness forest like in Shadow of the Erdtree, Caligo could have been a snowy map, Sentient Pest could have been a swamp. Yeah, no, never mind. Forget I said that. And there's like no other modes. There's no maps, difficulty sliders, me from the future again. They have added the first enhanced boss, the Gaping Jaw. And I gotta say, holy shit! So what's the big difference between this one and the normal version? Well, this one starts off with phase 2 right off the fucking bat. That's one difference. Yeah, phase 2. So you may be thinking, well, is it only phase 2? No. He has a phase 3 now. And phase 3, oh my god, what even happened? Guy is the purple flash of the leaf. I have no clue what the hell just even happened. So basically for the third phase, he does this giant nuke and you need to haul ass out of the way. No, seriously, you need to run. There's no way you can dodge this. You need to run away. And then once that happens, he is in a giant tornado, which looks awesome. And the only way to get inside of it is to use these spirit springs so you can jump super high up and land inside of it. If you're not inside of it, your health gets chipped away slowly. And then, I mean, I can't even tell you what moves he uses. Poison is still a big help though, and luckily the teammates I was playing with, they knew that too, so they would always use poison against him while I did the huge damage with my big ass sword. This boss is no joke, definitely enhanced indeed, and I gotta say, a lot of fun. Seriously, I can't wait till they add the other enhanced versions of the bosses. Hell, why not go all out and add a boss rush mode like in Black Myth Wukong, where you can choose which bosses to fight and it becomes a competition. Little things like that will keep people coming. This is more of a pet peeve of mine, but the RNG of this game pisses me off sometimes. Before you start a run, you can see the weakness a boss can have. This is very useful to know because if you use a weapon that has the ailment the boss is weak to, you and your team can steamroll these bosses. Some areas actually indicate which ailment you can get there after defeating the boss. Problem is, a lot of the times, I wasn't blessed with the fortune of having an area with the ailment I needed. That would mean the Night Lord would be more difficult, which, sure, get good, but it's just frustrating that our chances of defeating a Night Lord have significantly dropped because we just did not get lucky enough with the map we got. Oh, and another thing, which FromSoft dangled in front of us in the trailers, it was the return of the classic bosses from their past games. Nameless King, Centipede Demon. I thought, who else could they possibly add into the game? Fume Knight, Pontiff Sullivan, Lord Gwyn? Well, I was wrong because there's only 6. 6! What a missed opportunity. And dude, I have nearly 50 hours in this game and I've only seen the Dancer of the Boreal Valley once, and the same goes for the Smelter Demon and the Duke's Deer Frasia. Also, I have yet to see a walking mausoleum. I didn't even know those were in the game. You know how Morgoth will hunt you down at random? Well, why limit it to just him? Why not include the Pursuer? He was born to do this. Pursue! You have all these dragons, but what about my boy Seath? Does his blindness prevent him from finding us in the boss arena? Can you imagine if Gale was here? That would be the tits. Also, why not add some of the Shadow of the Erdtree bosses? We only got the Hippopotamus, but why not Bale? Bale was awesome.
Curse you, Bale!
Not just the bosses, but the variety of enemies in Nightreign is lacking. Like, come on, imagine seeing some Dark Souls enemies walking around. Black Knights, Killer Trees, the Dark Souls 2 giants, but it never happened. It didn't even need to be only main bosses either. It could have been done as mini bosses around the world. If I'm going to a magical ruin, let me fight the Moonlight Butterfly. Or if I'm walking through a mausoleum, put the Black Knight in there with the dual-wield greatswords. Shit, put me in a small-ass room with a Capra Demon and a bunch of dogs. Also, the relic system sounds good on paper. You find them after completing runs or buying them, and you can equip them on your character to acquire skills and advantages. Problem is, most of them are ass. Like seriously, the only way to get good ones is to make it to day 3, and even then it's not guaranteed. Or again, you just buy them from the shop. But again, not guaranteed. The only way to get great relics for a character is to complete their remembrances, and once you do that and get the relics, you won't use any other one and just end up keeping those remembrance relics on at all times. Which kind of begs the question, why bother gambling away for a decent relic when you can get a guaranteed awesome one from doing remembrances? Even the good ones are kind of boring. They're just buffs to stats, resistances, or starting with certain items or weapon abilities. Yeah, sure, it's helpful, but it's just boring. You can't really see any difference in these abilities. Some relics have character-specific abilities that actually feel like a difference since you can see it. For example, with Wilder, when you use his skill, your sword catches on fire and you do this follow-up attack. That's cool. And then when you use your ultimate, it leaves an area of fire. Again, nice. Or Guardian, where if you charge your attack, you create a whirlwind. I want more of this. Even the passive abilities you can get after defeating night bosses are cooler than the relics. Lightning when you roll, a storm of falling stars, glintstone blades around you. I want upgrades you can actually see. Unfortunately, these abilities are rare. Those are all the complaints I can think about. Really? Don't get it twisted. I don't hate this game. In fact, I think it's awesome. And luckily, all these issues are things that can be tweaked and fixed and currently are being fixed and tweaked. Because the underlying game itself is not the problem. The core of it is very fun and promising. It's like when Cyberpunk 2077 came out with all those bugs. Yeah, the bugs were horrible, but the game itself, the meat of it, was scrumptious. I only say these negative things about Nightreign because I see the immense potential the game could have if FromSoft gives it the right support. The characters work, the bosses work, the gameplay works, the replayability works, but it could be even better if FromSoft continuously updates the game, which it looks like they're doing. It's all exciting stuff. All of this makes the gameplay great and an enjoyable experience, which is what I want. Look, this game is not going to be winning Game of the Year, and that's okay. Not every new release needs to be nominated and break records. Gamers nowadays think if a game doesn't sell tens of millions of copies or the Steam player chart isn't in the hundreds of thousands, it's a flop. Not every game needs to be an industry-changing juggernaut. As long as it's good fun, enjoyable, and you feel like you got your money's worth, that's all that matters, and that definitely applies to me. The groundwork FromSoft has established here is awesome. They can really go all out and make this a celebration of all their past works. They can add enemies and bosses not just from the Dark Souls trilogy, but Sekiro, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, shit, even Armored Core. Let me fight some fucking mechs. I do appreciate FromSoft experimenting and trying something new, but most of all, taking a risk. That's so rare to see in an industry where companies just want to play it safe and won't give the people what they want. Maybe FromSoft is using Nightreign to experiment with Duskbloods, which hopefully is also a fun multiplayer game. Anyways, what did you guys think? Do you like or dislike Nightreign? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and yeah, thanks for watching.